This video demonstrates how to identify potential problems with the printability of the type in your design and outlines some strategies for fixing any problems you may find. The two most common problems associated with unprintable font type are lines or serifs that are too thin to print, filling in of space between and within letters caused by insufficient knockout space. All components of your type must be at least 1 point. Any component that is thinner than 1 point will not print. You can check to see if a line within an image is sufficiently thick by drawing a 1-point line next to it and using the pen tool. Set the stroke weight to 1 point using the stroke palette. Since the line we drew is thicker than the lines that make up the letters, these lines are not printable. Knockout space is defined as any area that is created using negative space. This negative space is where the color of your garment will show through. If the knockout space between or inside your letters is not at least 2 points, it may fill in with ink during the printing process. The procedure for checking knockout space is similar to that used to check line thickness. This time, create a 2-point line and see if the line will fit within or between any knockout areas in your image. If it doesn't, your image will need to be adjusted. We will explore these issues using 5 common fonts: Times New Roman, Impact, Helvetica, Arial, and Myriad. But you can use the methods described here to check any font you decide to use in your design. A serif is an embellishment on a letter that is not part of the main letter form. Times New Roman is a common serif font. Since serifs are usually small details, they will not print properly at a small size. Just as before, we drew a 1-point blue line for reference to help determine if our lines are sufficiently thick. As you can see, this 16-point type is far from being within specs, primarily due to the presence of the serifs and the thin lines in the font. In order to print this font, we'd have to enlarge the text to at least 56 point, which makes this font a very poor choice for small text. Impact is a new sans serif font. Since it lacks serifs, it does not suffer from the same problem as Times New Roman. It is also bold, so its components are thick enough to print at a small size. Unfortunately, the centers of the letters are very thin and do not meet the minimum 2-point knockout requirements. In fact, the insides of letters such as the P and E are so thin that the minimum font size for Impact is 80 points, which makes it a poor choice for small text. Other examples of problematic letters are O, A, and S. Similarly, the bold versions of most fonts will suffer from knockout issues because there is less space within the centers of the letters than in non-bold versions. Helvetica and Arial are better choices for small sizes, but some letters do present problems. Notice the thin space between these components of the S and E. In order to meet the art requirements, both Helvetica and Arial must be at least 30 points. Myriad is another sans serif font, but unlike Helvetica and Arial, its S and E meet the minimum requirements at a much smaller size. This font is safe to print at sizes as small as 16 points. Similar fonts, such as Calibri, Trebuchet MS, Verdana, and Tahoma, can also be printed at 16 points. We recommend using one of these fonts anytime you must set text below 30 points. If the type in your design has not yet been converted to curves, changing the font is easy. Here, we will use the Type tool to select some text and change it from an unprintable Times New Roman to the optimally printable Myriad. Notice, however, that the font size is only 12 points and is therefore too small to print. Luckily, we can easily change the size to 16 point. One problem still remains, because the space between the letters is still less than 2 points. If you click on the blue Character panel, you can adjust the spacing between letters by adjusting the tracking. Here, we adjust it to 100 to ensure that there is enough space between the letters. If the type in your design is not editable because it was previously converted to outlines, then you will need to recreate the text from scratch. First, we delete the original text and retype. As before, we select an appropriate font and set the type to a reasonable size. Then, we adjust the tracking to make sure there's enough space between the letters. To review, check all type used in your design to make sure it meets the minimum requirements for line width and knockout space. Use sans serif fonts such as Myriad for small type for optimal printing. Pro World Custom. Produce your own custom transfers at pwcustom.com.